I moved from leading a team of 2,000 people to moving in as the fractional CEO of a charity.
Our guests today operate at the highest level of corporate oversight. We are happy to be joined today by Hugh McCallum, the Managing Director of each Business Solution.
Are you still happy in the company that I was working with at the time? And I remember sort of saying to him, yeah, of course. And he said, no, stop. Why? Right? Why? Why are you saying that?
That means that it's very important to remember what you have to say to people.
I have no time for myself. I said to him, what does time for yourself look like? And he said to me, I want to go and play paddle on a Friday afternoon and not worry about my clients, right? So I took him through a process, right? And now he's in a situation where on a Friday afternoon, he can go play paddle. And that to me is success.
Have you, at this moment of vulnerability of your life, just find out who is the right coach?
So when I was overly enthusiastic about something, I would go to this person and say, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And I knew they would bring me down, but you've got to listen. Why are they bringing you down? Why are they sort of saying, oh, that's a rubbish idea, right?
Welcome today to the home of community impact, where we grow, we inspire, we make an impact one step at a time. Our guests today operate at the highest level of corporate oversight. We are happy to be joined today by Hugh McCallum, the Managing Director of each Business Solution and recently accredited Director with the Institute of Director of Ireland. Hugh brings 20 years of domestic and international leadership experience, including distinguished tenure in Accenture as an operation director and also as a director of health and public services. Now, today is a very important day for me at GSTV because I see you as one of my mentors, even though he has never known he was my mentor. So we really want to welcome you today to the show. Thank you for being here with us today, Hugh.
Aileen, thank you so much for having me on. Honestly, I'm honored to be on your TV show. So thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. So before we do anything, we talk about anything, first, I want to congratulate you first for your recent accreditation at the Charter of Director this year, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's really amazing achievement.
Yeah, look, for me, it was an investment in my future. It's a year-long course. Once you've done the exams, you then have to apply to be accepted as a chartered director with the Institute of Directors, and you have to go through an interview process. So it's quite a rigorous process. But what I really enjoyed about it was the learning that I got. So it's not just about going through the process and getting the accreditation. Actually, the learning that you get from it is incredible. And I think for me, one of the key themes that I wanted to sort of chat about today is continuous learning. You know, we're never too old to keep learning new things and keep learning new skills and talents. And I think for me, that's what's helped me to grow and what's helped me to be successful in the areas that I've been successful in.
Yeah, and actually, it's amazing that you talked about continuous learning because, as my guests are gonna hear from you today, that you have like a lot of changes in your career since you left college. I would say, and that's something that I want to talk about. But before we go into that, I really want to, my guests. I know you to a certain extent because you've been my senior manager, senior director in a company I worked for in the past. But I think my guests would like to know a little bit more about your background, right? Who was you? What has influenced you as when you were growing up, and where you're coming from?
Yeah. So look, I'm from South Africa originally. I grew up. It was during the apartheid era. And as a result of that, you know, I grew up in I would consider now to be a very protected environment. You know, it was a really good side of the city that I grew up in, Durban. I had a lovely family. We got on really well, you know, and all that type of thing. Typical family squabbles, but nothing serious. It was a very loving family and all that. And then because I was a white male South African, I had to do national service at the time. So you could choose either 2 years army or 4 years police. I decided to do the police because I wanted to study, and you could study through the police force. So I joined that, and for me, that's really when my eyes were opened as to what was going on with apartheid. I hadn't really appreciated it before, but I was really sort of starting to see um, the evils that apartheid was actually bringing, and I think for me, it was a massive eye opener for me. I enjoyed my time in the police. I really did, because I felt like I was serving a community. I was putting criminals behind bars. I enjoyed that. Um, and also, it gave me my first sort of exposure to real life and to hardship, which I hadn't really experienced in my time growing up. As I said, I was quite privileged in my growing up environment, but it really gave me an experience and exposure to human nature, but to the sufferings of obviously the blacks in South Africa, the black people in South Africa, but all that. But I think on a leadership and growth perspective, it really gave me the ability to start to read people and to understand people. And I hadn't, as I said, I hadn't really done that before. Throughout my sort of career, or sorry, throughout my school life, I hadn't really sort of had to do any of that. As a police officer, you have to walk into a situation and know immediately whether or not you're at risk or not. Is somebody in here trying to kill me or not? And especially in South Africa at the time, it was very violent. And that type of thing. So, for me, that sort of really gave me that eye opener. But I think that the biggest thing that I would take away from that time was learning about leadership, right,
Okay.
and what it takes to be a leader.
Okay.
When I was at school, I think like most schools, at some point you have to stand up and you have to do an oral, and you have to speak in front of the class, and I absolutely hated it. Right, I was so nervous. I couldn't do any public speaking. I was just in bits. Whereas in the police, you have to stand up and talk to people and all that type of thing. So it got me over that fear. The other thing that I feel that it taught me is that we're our own worst enemy. You can look at a situation in two ways, positively or negatively. You can also put restrictions on yourself. I very much don't like to label people or label myself, because I feel that almost gives you an excuse to behave in that certain way, or be restricted in that certain way. Going through my basic training in the police force, when as you would seen in movies and that, your drill sergeant, your drill instructor will make you run until you can't run any further. And just when you think you can't run any further, you run again, and you do more press ups and more all of these things. And I started to realize that actually, just when I think I couldn't do anything more, and when you're forced to do something more, you actually can. So you're your own worst enemy in that way. And I think that gave me a lot of my foundation for trying to understand human nature, human behavior, and thing. And as I said, for me, leadership. So when I left the police, it was all about the only leadership experience that I'd seen was command and control, right? You're given orders and you follow the orders. It's as simple as
Yeah.
that. Right? You don't get to have debates or discussions with your commanding officer. It just doesn't work like that. My first job outside of the police, I was very much, so I had an absolutely fantastic boss. I really did. And he showed me a different way of leadership, right? It wasn't about fear. It wasn't about command and control and all of that. And I became very fascinated by leadership and human nature and all that type of thing. Fast forward that on a few years, I was sent on different training courses and all that type of thing. Fast forward that on to a couple of years, there was a particular person in Accenture when I arrived in Ireland, and her feedback to me was, your team members are scared of you. And I remember looking at that going, oh my goodness, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. I don't want anybody to be afraid of me. It's not that I want to be loved. It's not that a leader doesn't necessarily have to be loved, but at the same time, a leader can't be feared, right? So I asked her for specifics, and I have to say, I very much do credit her for having the bravery to actually tell me about this. You know what I mean? But I think any feedback that you get is an absolute gift, and it's yours to decide what to do with that gift. You can either react to it, or and push against it, or you can say, what am I going to take from this? What am I going to learn from it? And I decided to do the sort of the latter. So I went and I got myself a mentor. And I said, look, this is the feedback I've been given. What can I do about this, right? And so we went through it, and over the course of a couple of months, he worked with me, gave us a lot of advice and guidance, a lot of helpful, sort of tips. And I've sort of taken that, and as I said, for me, that was again, this sort of this growth element that I know you like to talk about.
Yeah.
It came back to the continuous learning, right? You can't ever stop learning, because if you stop learning, you stop growing. And I think that the world is changing so fast at the moment with absolutely everything. If you think about international politics, if you think about AI, if you think about the wars that we're experiencing, if you think about the economic downturns and all that type of thing, all of these things impact us in one way, shape, or form. And it's up to us to make sure that we know what's going on and we understand it, we can adapt to it.
Okay.
Humans are incredibly adaptable, right? If we allow ourselves to be. And I think that for me is one of the things, is going from being a police officer, carrying, at one stage in my career, I had 5 different guns that I would carry every single day of my life, to now, being a leadership and running my own company in business consulting. It's been through a journey of learning, adapting, and learning from people. You learn from everybody, right? You learn from absolutely everybody. That's the thing. You can't sort of say, well, I'm only going to learn from other leaders. No, you don't. You learn from your staff members. You learn from your family. You learn from, the person walking down the street, and that type of thing.
And that is amazing. You actually cover a lot of the questions that I have in terms of your upbringing. But there's one thing that caught my attention. There's 2 things actually. But the one that I want to focus more on is you mentioned about the move from a police to a different environment. So someone will be thinking, because it's right now at the moment, there's a lot of people who are trying to transition, and they just want one thing that tells them this is time to move on, right?
Yeah.
So what was the decision process? Why did you step away from public service to private sector, and completely different environment, I have to say? Is it?
Yeah.
What happened?
So when I joined the police, I joined because I had to. It was the law. As a white male South African, I had to do national service.
Okay.
And I said, so stayed for 4 years. That was my obligation. I ended up staying for 8, so another 4 on top of that. But it was never my intention to be a career police officer. Never, right? And I remember sort of, half-heartedly applying for jobs and that type of thing. And I bumped into a school friend, and he said to me, "Oh, what are you doing?" I hadn't seen him for, since we left school together. And I said, "Oh, I'm a cop, but I'm looking to get out." And he said to me, "I'm sure all you cops always say that." And I remember being quite offended at the time, right? Going, who's this guy? He's judging me. I haven't seen him for 8 years. He's judging me. And I think I walked like 10 steps away from him, and I turned around and I said, "You know what? He's right. He's absolutely right. I need to stop procrastinating, and I need to just get on and do it." Right. And, so for me, it was very much taking that first step, because I realized with his very direct and very cutting comments to me that he was absolutely right, that I'd just been procrastinating, right?
Yeah.
So I think, if you think that the time is right, then just do it, right? I got some fantastic advice from a coach the one time, and it wasn't to do with this, but it was something else. I had a big piece of work to do, and it was kind of overwhelming, and I didn't know where to sort of start. And I sort of said to the coach, "Look, I'm struggling to actually get motivated to do it." And she said to me, ultimately, "Look, your problem is motivation, right? Your problem is this is overwhelming. You don't know where to start."
Okay.
And so she said to me, where are you going to, what do you need to do about this? I said, I need to sit down and think, right? So she said to me, "Okay, where are you going to do that?" I said, "Well, in my office." I said, "Okay, great. When are you going to do it?" I said, "Okay, well, I'll do it next week sometime." She said, No. When next week? And we went through, eventually we got down to my actually making sure that I had a pen and paper, because I was going to write it down on a pen and paper. So she got me to go and get the pen and paper while I was on the call with her and get it set up, so that everything that I needed was set up before. I blocked the time out in my diary. I blocked 10 minutes before to go and make myself a cup of tea and all that type of thing. So this massive undertaking was broken down into the smallest little things, so that actually by the time you get down to sitting and doing it, there's actually no more excuses. You can just get on and do it. And I
Yeah.
found that that's such great advice from this coach that I had, and she was brilliant from that perspective. I got it done. I got it done exactly when we sort of planned it. So I think people are thinking about, should I make a move and that type of thing. Take the first step, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another silly example. I sort of say, we all want to be healthy, right? We all want to go to gym and all that type of thing, or go for a run, or go for a walk. But in the middle of winter, when it's cold outside and you're sort of sitting back, you've just had your dinner or whatever the case may be, you're going, oh, the last thing I feel like doing is actually going to the gym or going for a run or going for a walk or whatever. So what I say to people is, don't make that decision now. Go and get changed into your outfit, right, that you're going to do to wear to the gym or go for the run, and then make the decision, right?
Okay.
You
Okay.
break it down into the smallest things, and you find most of the time, once you're in your gym outfit already, you kind of go, oh, well, I might as well go and do it then. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
again, it's just breaking things down into the very smallest level of detail.
That is so amazing what you just say, because a lot of times the blockage comes from where do I start and how do I start
Yes,
and when do I
yes,
start. Now,
yes,
the two important key things that you mentioned is the ability to have the right coach as well. And a lot of
yes,
people as well are stuck because they just don't know how the process of doing what they want to do needs to happen, right?
yes,
Like, so you had that trigger from your friend who just, your old classmate who just say, you not reminded you of, you're just
yes,
procrastinating indirectly in somehow, right?
yeah,
And then you took the boost. But some people will get that comment and go downhill because a
yeah,
lot of people receive this kind of trigger in the wrong way. So it can
yes,
go two
yes,
ways. It can go like, oh my God, this is true about myself. And it can be like, no, I'm not good. So what I'm hearing here is that the ability to change can also come from you saying,
yes,
no, I'm not settling for less, right?
yes,
I'm
yes,
going for
yes,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Now, and then you coach, right? So your
yeah,
coach was so practical, right?
yes.
Now, how do people then in this growth process learn, find out the right coach? Because you hear people have a lot of experience with wrong coaching, right?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you, as this moment of vulnerability of your life, just find out who is the right coach? How do you
That,
recognize?
yeah, that's a great question. And I think it is going to be trial and error, because there's two things that you need from a coach. You need to understand what is it that you want. And a good coach will always sort of say to you, look, why are you here? What's in business, you sort of say, what's the problem statement with this? Do you know what I mean? Why have you come to me? What are you looking for? And then you would agree with that coach up front, look, this is the way we're going to work. And different coaches will have different approaches and different things. And I've had numerous different coaches, both formal and informal, and it's important to have both of those as well. So if I give you two examples, I've had numerous coaches, and I have a coach at the moment that helps me, because, as I said, especially in running your own business and doing your own thing, the biggest issue that you have is that there's nobody to sort of sense check what you're doing. Right. There's nobody to sort of challenge you and kind of go, well, actually, Hugh, I think you're wrong there. Right. Do you know what I mean? Which I think is such an important part of learning. But, one of the coaches I had, for example, I'm a very structured person. I love structure. I love discipline. I love all of these things. Do you know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, I can attest to that, guys. I will tell my guess what happened
Yeah.
when my
But like in one of my coaches, I would plan for all of our meetings. I would have, right, this is what I want to cover, and I'd write it down, and I'd think. And then what happened was, in one of the meetings, I went from meeting to meeting to meeting, so I didn't have time to plan and structure. And actually, that meeting was the best meeting I ever had with that coach, right? He went and he said to me, what do you want to talk about today? And I said, I don't know. And we just started talking, and then it was the most benefit that I got out of any meeting I ever had with him was that meeting when I didn't plan and didn't structure.
okay.
So, I think being open to trying different things, but you've got to try out your coach. If you don't gel with the coach, then It needs to move on,
Okay.
firstly, and you need to sort of move on. But second, and your coach should actually say that to you as well. Do you know what I mean? If this isn't working, it's not working. But the other thing is, in the beginning, you be upfront with your coach about, look, this is what I want. And then your coach should really sort of say to you, look, that's not what I'm doing with you, right? That's not the way I work. And coaching, there's no set way of coaching. You have different styles of coaching. Different people do approach it slightly differently. Some will coach you, some will mentor you, some will do both, and that type of thing. And those two things are quite fundamentally different. But so I do think it's a little bit of trial and error, but it's a little bit about being very clear upfront with what you want. And if you already have a coaching relationship, then have the conversation. Say, look, this is what I think I want to get out of this. What do you think? You know?
Okay. Okay.
But the other thing I would add to that, sorry, Eileen, the other thing I would add to that is don't be afraid to have informal coaches, you know, where it's not, you're not going up to somebody saying, listen, will you coach me and I'll pay you. It's people that you can rely on just to have a conversation with and be open to listening to them, right? I had, when I was working with you in Accenture, I had three people that I would use in an informal relationship. One of them was the most negative person in the world, right? And I specifically used this person because I inclined to be a little bit, you know, over enthusiastic or energetic about something. So when I was overly enthusiastic about something, I would go to this person and say, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And I knew they would bring me down, but you've got to listen. Why are they bringing you down? Why are they sort of saying, oh, that's a rubbish idea, right? And it happened when I got promoted to senior manager. I went to this person. I said, listen, look at the job spec. I'm going to apply for this job. And they said to me, why would you do that? That's not a senior manager role. That's a ridiculous job, right? And I was going, okay, so tell me why, right?
Yeah.
And they told me, and I used those questions in the interview. I said, listen, I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. And I was satisfied afterwards. So I ended up taking the role. But I took her advice. I listened and I sort of said, look, you know, what's going on here? So the key thing about any coaching relationship is you've got to be open to listening. You don't have to agree with everything, but you've got to be open to listening.
Now, self-esteem is a big key there.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you one thing, everything you say so far, it shows someone who has a positive self-image, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we're looking at this coach and mentor as people who are going to boost our ego, all right? And and a lot of times, if you are prepared to get a negative, you're prepared to get a positive, that is amazing. It's a very important point that you made there, that people don't need to look at the coach as their therapist, right? Because that's what happens most of the time. And then they tell you what you want to hear, and it becomes a problem. That is amazing. And we're talking, we're going to step away a little bit from your growth process, and which is amazing because you gave us a lot of insight there. But I want to say something that you mentioned earlier about the things that you learn. You grow up in a very nice environment, which you were privileged. You are acknowledged that you're grateful about what you were brought up to, right? But then you say you learned something about the whole world being bad, especially in your environment there in South Africa, talking about apartheid. How were you when you realized that your privilege was that you had a privilege, but you were oblivious of what really was happening? What is that? How did you feel, and what did you learn from it? What are the things that you saw that made you feel like, oh my God, this is horrible? What happened?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I felt ashamed. I felt weak. I felt that I wasn't strong enough to see the truth, right? And that for me was it was humiliating, if I'm honest with you. And it was, and I made a pact. The only way I was able to actually move past that was to make a pact never to repeat that with anybody or anything. So I had this view, for example, that every single person that I meet deserves my respect. If they do something afterwards, right, then the opposite of respect is not disrespect, right? Right, and that's an important distinction for me. So if somebody does something that I don't agree with and I don't like, I won't disrespect them, but I just won't respect them. All right. So for me, and a lot of people say, oh, respect is earned. I don't agree with that, right? Everybody's entitled to their own opinion, right? For me, I by default, I'll give everybody my respect, everybody. And that is something that I learned through that process. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
During apartheid, there was an overwhelming majority of the population that was, as far as I'm concerned, just disrespected, right? To put it mildly. And when you start seeing the impact that has had, and a big thing for me was how education was used as a weapon, right?
Okay.
To keep people subjugated, and that's why for me, I didn't appreciate my school education. I didn't, right? And then I was like, okay, so again, for me, that was a privilege that I had, right? And so that's why a lot of my learning and growing is focusing on education, not just academic, right, but growth in all aspects. And that is why, I sort of said, look, I need to be open to feedback. I need to be open to positive and negative. And it's not just about getting the positive feedback. You can learn from positive feedback. That's fantastic. But you also learn from mistakes. You learn from negative feedback. As much as you may hate learning, and it doesn't mean to say that it's any easier, right? I get negative feedback today. It'll still be hard to take. It's not easy. It doesn't get easier,
No,
right?
it doesn't get it there. Yeah,
No,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
So
Especially
I
when you believe that you're going to the right direction and you're
yes,
known to doing something right. Yeah, and they're like,
yeah,
"What are you
yeah,
talking about? I thought I was doing this."
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know what you mean. Yeah.
So, and as an example, and maybe just a funny example, so I use AI in my work, right? But one of the things that I've specifically said, so I've given AI instructions on me, and I've said that I wanted to challenge me in every single thing I say. Right. So if I ask it a question and it gives me an answer and I say, that's great, now I'm going to do this, that, the next thing, it will come back and say, oh, I don't agree with you. Right. So it's actually really good from that perspective, you know.
I'm so glad you brought the subject of AI because AI has changed a lot of our lives, and the career, the journey that we're taking today is a lot of work have been affected by AI. My work has
Yes.
been
Yes.
affected by AI,
Yeah.
and even my content creation. Now you can see the benefit and sometimes the negativity of AI. Now there's
Yeah.
a war in people's mind about AI.
Yes.
So people still see AI as a rival, right?
Yeah.
From especially the our generation, like I'm talking about the younger generation sees as a tool, but for us it's more like we're still holding on to the you have to learn, right? So how do you navigate that in this transition that you have in your life, accepting, especially our generation that we are,
Yeah.
accepting how what AI is doing, the positive and the negative side of it. How do you navigate that as a director, especially in a company like the one year you started?
Yeah, yeah. So again, it's a great question, Aileen. So I think, look, at the end of the day, I don't have the ability to influence whether or not AI is coming. Change is happening, right? You can either get on board and work with it, or you can try and buck against it. And if you buck against it, it's just not you're going to come out the loser. It's the simple. That's the end of it, right? If I think about the one thing I learned in history uh, was when they made the sort of the production lines, and all of a sudden things were being automated with these production lines, especially with cars, right? Talking about generations ago, centuries ago, not centuries, sorry, decades ago.
Yeah.
That changed how people do things. That change, people will put out of jobs, all that type of thing, and that is an unfortunate reality of change. Change
Yeah.
is going to happen whether you like it or not. So you can either get on board with it or you can buck it. I've
Okay.
decided to get on board with it. But the biggest thing for me, right, and especially in my business, but especially with my upbringing in that, is it's all about the ethics, right?
Okay.
So when I use AI, I tell people I'm using AI, right? I don't use AI to create content that I couldn't create. I use AI to verify my content mostly. So if I'm writing a report, for example, I will put all of my input and say, this is the feedback, this is the background, this is my recommendations based on that background. And then I say, right, can you put this into report format for me? And can you challenge my recommendations? Again, coming back to that point, right? I always ask AI to challenge my recommendations. So it's not coming up with its original content itself. I'm putting the content in. It's just validating or challenging me. And in some cases it says, yeah, no, that's fine. And it says, oh, you didn't think about this, that, and the next thing. And then you take that yourself and go, well, actually, no, in this context, what you've told me is wrong, or I don't agree with it. And actually, yeah, that's a really good point. And then I put it into my own words.
Okay.
So for me, ethical AI is still the most essential thing. And I really, I think that you need to be using AI, right? We all need to be using AI. But just being aware of its limitations and being ethical about it. AI is not perfect. It does make mistakes. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
And, so you can't just get it to create an output for you and expect it to be 100% correct. It's not. It won't be, right? And I use different AI engines for different things as well,
No.
and all of that. But, because some of them are better at analysis and some of them are better at image creation, for example, and all that type of thing.
Yeah. You work through, that's really important. You work through, as you work through different companies since you arrived in Ireland. By the way, we can come into your arriving in Ireland and the change into the environment. But for now, let's stay a little bit more onto starting your company, right?
Yes.
So you started a company after you worked in the private sector for a while, like for example, being a director in Accenture and growing in Accenture, obviously. And now you decide to go on your own. That's a big step, right? So
Yes.
that's huge. So how do you like the process of starting your own business and the things that you've learned from your previous experience as a police person, as a person working in different companies and mostly Accenture? What are the key skill that I know you talked about taking the step earlier and the courage and the coach and everything, but what are all the things that you did while you're in the process of getting your business off the ground? What are the key skills that you learned that have made you say, okay, you know what, I'm sticking to it and I'm not giving up, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'd like to tell you it was a fantastic story from the beginning, but it wasn't. It was hard work, and it was very, very nerve-wracking, right?
Mm,
And I think I consider myself very lucky to have the support of my lovely wife, right? But honestly, if it wasn't for her support, I don't think I could have done it. And at the end of the day, whether it's your husband, your wife, your partner, whatever, you need support from somebody, right? It's a very difficult thing to do, to go it alone. Of course, some people do it, and some people are just natural entrepreneurs. That's not me, right? As I said, I'm more of a structured, disciplined person, and that serves me well in the business. But I think for me, the key thing for me was when I decided to leave Accenture. Sort of, I was kind of going, I'm mid 50s at this stage. What do I want to be doing with my life? And this, that, the next thing. My brother in South Africa had just passed away, and I was
sorry.
looking at my life. No, look, it's fine.
Mm,
We're over it. We're not over it, but
yeah.
yeah, we've come to terms with it. Sorry, not over it. You never get over something like that. We come to terms with
Yeah.
it. But I think for me, that gave me a reflection point, and I was looking at this going, do I really want to be sitting in Accenture in another 10 years doing the same stuff? So initially when I decided to leave Accenture, I wasn't planning on setting up my own business. So I moved from leading a team of 2,000 people to moving in as the fractional CEO of a charity where I led a team of 5 people. So
Yeah.
it was quite a significant change for me. But I
Yeah.
felt it was such a brilliant learning opportunity,
Yeah.
because a charity and people that work for a charity just think completely differently, right? They don't think the same as a corporate. The values are so much more important, and all that type of thing. And I learned so much from working at Clanwilliam, from the staff members there that were just fantastic with me, and all that type of thing. But again, it's important that you're open to listening, right, and understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
So that was that. I did that for 6 months. And then I took on a contract role with another company. I won't mention the name, but I took on a contract role with another company. And I sort of walked in. It was a long story. I was supposed to go in there as a full-time employee. They then called me and said, "Look, we're not going to do that anymore. But we'd like you to come and do some consulting." And I said, "Fine, happy days." And then they sort of say, when I arrived, I sort of said, look, what would you like me to look at? They said, look, we know we need help. We're just not 100% sure where, right? We've got these ideas and that, but we're not exactly sure where. And I remember that my overwhelming feeling at the time was, oh, this is fantastic. I love this, right? And that's what really sort of sparked me to say, actually, I think I need to start my own business, right?
Oh, wow.
Now, so, instead of trying to apply for PAYE roles or for employee roles, I then decided, no, actually, what I'll do is I'll actually run my own business. And then I made the very first mistake that that I teach all of my clients not to make, is that I didn't worry about my pipeline. So I ended that contract at the end of 2024 in December. January 2025, I had no clients, I had no plan, I had nothing. I just knew I wanted to start my own business. So I
Okay.
was like, okay. So I very, the advice and guidance I've gotten from all of my coaches and everybody is it's all about the network, right? It is all about your network. And I said to them, look, my network is all people from Accenture. That's it. I said, I don't have a network of people that are going to employ me, right?
Yeah.
And they said, well, you need to work on that then, right? I said, fine, fair enough. And that's what I did. And look, it took me, I would say, about 9 months of very, very nerve-wracking times of not knowing if revenue was going to come in and all that. But I've grown it, and I am very delighted to say that it's really, really going well for me. Towards the end of 25 and this year so far, it's really going well for me. But the most important thing for me, I'm I said this is another sort of hangover for me. When to digress very quickly, when I left the police, people were saying to me, you're going to miss that authority that you used to have that you don't have anymore. And honestly, I didn't miss it, and I still don't miss it at all. I love the fact that I don't have that responsibility and that authority to have to do those things. What I did miss immediately was that feeling that I was doing something for the community, something for somebody else, right?
Okay.
And that's why I've done a lot of volunteering in my time, because that sense of purpose is quite important. Um, and I struggled with that in Accenture a little bit, right? And Accenture is fantastic from that perspective because it gave me opportunities to volunteer and to contribute back to community. So I really enjoyed that. But what I'm loving about my current Ridge Business Solutions, the role that I'm doing at my own company, is I get to support very small companies. So micro and small businesses is what I'm currently focusing on. And I know that I'm adding value, right? I can see that I'm adding value. And I'm helping these small businesses to grow or to fix their problems or to whatever. When you're working for the very large clients, you're kind of going, am I really adding value? Right? I know I'm employed to do this job and I love doing the job, don't get me wrong, but am I really adding value? Yeah, maybe the client that I'm supporting is going from 100 million to 110 million. Brilliant, right? Is that going to make a difference to anybody? Whereas the
Yeah.
companies I'm supporting at the moment are actually going from potentially not being profitable to being profitable. That's impacting people's lives directly, and I love that.
Yeah, and that's so important because my question is now the how do you measure the impact beyond the
Yeah,
balance sheet that you
yeah,
have in
yeah, yeah,
on the health of any organization that you support now? So
yeah.
I know it's quite new to you, but how do you measure that impact?
So that's a great question, Eileen, because it's different for every client, right? So if I just take maybe 3 different clients. So one of my clients, the owner wants to sell within 5 years, right?
Okay.
So he's asked me to help increase the value of his business. So brilliant. So that's the goal, all right? The other client that I have, the person, it's a very small company. The person is the CEO of this company. They have nobody to bounce ideas off of, right? So I'm there as his respectful challenger. So he's going, look, I'm thinking of doing this, and I'll sort of say, yeah, it's a great idea, or no, it's not a great idea, or let's talk about it. I very seldom will say that's a great idea or a bad idea, but we talk about it. We go through a sort of a process, and we think so. It's a bit more of a coaching relationship. And then a third type of client that I have is, the person came to me and said to me, I just want more time for myself. Right. At the moment, I'm working Monday to Saturday. I have no time for myself. I said to him, what does time for yourself look like? And he said to me, I want to go and play paddle on a Friday afternoon and not worry about my clients. Right. So I took him through a process. Right. And now he's in a situation where on a Friday afternoon, he can go play paddle. And that to me is success. It's not about the money. Right. I've done nothing for his revenue or his profits at all. It's just more about his personal time.
Okay. Yeah, that is fabulous. Honestly, because there's one thing you say earlier regarding your moving away from Accenture and the trigger that push you to think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because some people get settled, and I don't want people listening to us feel like everybody has to move out of companies and go. And now, although
Yeah.
it's a new trend, I see that with my kids here. They're changing. It's a new trend in the Gen Z. They're changing roles, and
Yes.
they're more risk.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
more risk than
Yes.
us, where we
Yes.
were happy to be in one place, and I'm going to retire that my life and my gray hair. Now, a lot of people feel that way. And a lot of people don't even think they need to, no matter what triggers. I mean, like for the case of you and me, for example, I lost my friend. That's the triggered me to do
Yeah.
broadcasting and to think about like, what do I really want to do? A lot of people feel like, oh, well, I'm quite comfortable. Most people feel comfortable, right? And
Yeah.
would you say it's a bad thing in a sense? It's not necessarily a bad thing, is it?
No. No,
No.
it's not a bad thing, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
Again, that's a lovely question, right? And it's a lovely way to think about it because,
Yeah.
yes, of course, often we make decisions based on triggers, right? And it could be, the death
Yeah.
of a loved one, or it could be, anything.
Mhm.
All of a sudden you're made redundant or something like that. Do you know what I mean? These triggers can force you into a sort of situation.
Yeah.
If you are sitting back and you're very happy in your job, why would you leave, right? But
Exactly.
but the one caveat that I would say to that is you need to consciously keep stock, right? Because happiness can turn into complacency. And that's what you want to make sure that you're avoiding, right? So I would say if you think about this in a business context, every year a business should be evaluating itself, going, are we still heading in the right direction? Are we doing what we want to do? Are we keeping up with our core values, all those types of things. A business will look at itself internally, and that's a good message for us. You should look at your own self, your own personal thing, sort of Aileen Inc., Hugh McCallum Inc., right? And you should be looking at that at least on an annual basis going, am I still happy here, right? And actually, this is the benefit of having a coach. So the last coach I had, not the current coach I have, the last coach I had, one of the first questions he said to me is, are you still happy in the company that I was working with at the time? And I remember sort of saying to him, yeah, of course, of course. And he said, no, stop. Why? Right? Why? Why are
Okay.
you saying that? Why are you being dismissive, and why are you just saying yes? And I remember sort of thinking back and going, well, okay, I wasn't thinking about his question, right? It didn't make me think, right? And then when he challenged me, I was saying, oh, okay, so hold on, right? And then what happened was every time we met, and initially we met every maybe 3-4 months, right? Every time we met, he would ask me the same question, and I would be prepared, right? And I go, yes, I'm still happy, right? These are the reasons I'm still happy. And I was in Accenture at the time, and I was going, yes, I'm still happy. These are the reasons I'm still happy. And I was going,
Okay.
great, fantastic. And then we moved on. So it's not a case of forcing you to move, but I would say it's important to reflect, right? To think about, am I, it comes back to am I still happy, right? Am I still doing what I want to be doing, right? Am
Yeah.
I happy with myself? Am I happy with the company? Am I growing still? If the world is changing, you need to change with it. There's so
Yeah.
many times you sort of say, you hear often of sort of people say, oh, I'm retiring. Saying, okay, retiring to what, right? What are you doing in retirement, right?
Yeah.
If you retire to something, it's very different than retiring from something, right? Retiring from this company, and then what do you do? And you often find that people's life expectancy after they retire is diminished greatly because they don't have a plan. They're not thinking about something. But it's the same while you're still working, right? It's not just about retirement. It's the same when you're still working. What's the plan? Because you can find that you just go through life trudging through, and then All of a
Yes.
sudden, it's 10, 15 years later, and you go, what have I done for the last 10 years, right? Or 5 years, or 2 years? I've wasted it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a waste, but, you can look back and say, yeah,
I've done something.
yeah,
And one of the things that I would say as well that can be a block for a lot of people is the change in the economy sometime and
yes,
the
yes,
crisis, the political crisis across the
yes,
world, and the change in the way people do business, right?
yes,
And people at the top as well. So the political changes kind of affect the ability for people to take risk, right? And also you have the pandemic. Remember during the
yes,
pandemic, people were risk adverse. They're like, I'm staying put here. People start looking at their job as the best safety net for them.
yeah, yeah,
So it brings that to that sense that there are people who do a self-assessment and realize they're not really happy, but then there's around the world situation that doesn't give them the courage to go and do
yeah,
something else. So what
yeah.
would you say to that?
Again, a lovely question, and I think it's going to be different from everybody for
Okay.
everybody, right? Some
Yeah.
people are far more. I despite the way it may sound, I actually consider myself to be quite a risk averse person, right? I
Okay.
really do.
Okay.
So I know it probably doesn't sound like it, but I am actually very risk averse, right?
Yeah.
But so for me, there's a couple of things. Number one, if you focus too much on the risk, you'll never do anything, right?
All right.
So you have to sort of consider the risk. And again, this comes back to the point is you can't make a decision in isolation, right? You just can't. I remember you surround yourself with people that are going to sort of help you and advise and guide and that type of thing. So I speak to my wife, I speak to my sisters, I speak to my brother, I speak to my coach, I speak to fellow mentors, current mentors, all of that type of thing. Do you know what I mean? There's still quite a few sort of senior people in Accenture that I still speak to and get advice and guidance and all of that type of thing. I remember at one stage after I left the police, my first job, and I remember meeting one of the people that used to report to me. His wife was an entrepreneur, and she was just the most inspiring person that you could actually ever meet. And they invited me around for dinner at their house, and over the course of dinner, she was just talking to me, and she was almost sort of interviewing me, kind of felt like just asking me about my life and my thing and where I wanted to go and that type of thing. And she was going, I think it'd be a great idea if you did this. And she had these absolutely incredible ideas. And I just thought to myself, in a million years, I never would have
I would
thought
do
of those things. Right.
that. She's a
Well,
dreamer.
I never would have
Don't you
thought
love
of
those
these
dreaming
things.
people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember driving home after that dinner going, I'm going to do all of those things, right? I'm going to do all. And then within a week, I was like, no. It's too risky. I don't want to do it. But can you imagine if I'd spent more than just 3 hours, if I'd been surrounded by those people, right? You would do it. You would absolutely do it. It was my own self-doubt. And that's why I say you've got to be able to talk to people and just check, is this just self-doubt or is this a genuine risk, right?
Yeah.
So you can't make decisions in isolation.
I need to tell you something I like about one of the things you say earlier about taking courage to actually go also and get negative feedback. There's a say in my culture, mostly in the black people tend to do that a lot. We always like stay away from people who tells you bad stuff. Stay away from
Yeah.
this and stay away from that. So it's just that really I don't know where it started because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember growing up, if you want to know negative, you just go to an African mother. She will tell you everything that is wrong with your behavior before you leave the house. That is a fact. Right? African, I'm the same. I shouldn't think I'm kind of saying we African we don't mess around with that word, right? But for some reason, there's a new trend of don't listen to someone who says something that doesn't align with you. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that you point out that it's actually you need to be comfortable with yourself enough to be able to want to hear that and to
Yes.
accept it, right? Because
Yes.
it's what you do with that feedback. Obviously, you're not going to get someone who's abusive, obviously,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah. Yeah.
abusive. We're talking about feedback that don't go your way, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I wanted to bring one thing about your business now. It's kind of growing. It's still like almost a year old now. I can see and all that. So for me is you are now finding that sense of I'm giving to the community like in the past, which is your core thing you want to give
Yeah.
to the community. So how, to what extent would you feel like you're successful in your business? When would be the point, the major point where you felt like this is what I'm going to bring to my client and how I'm going to get there, and that's what going to give me a sense of success and satisfaction? Are
Yeah.
you there yet, or are you still growing to that?
No, I would say, I would say, I think that I don't look at the long term. I don't look and say, I want to be here in 10 years' time. I want to be here in 5 years' time, right?
Oh wow.
I'm looking at each client sort of saying, am I actually adding value? And there is a particular client that I have that I've gone to the client and I said, look, I'm not actually adding value for you, right? Now the client, in fairness to him, he said, well, I disagree, right? Here's where you're helping me. And that's fine. But I sort of said to him, look, I could be doing so much more, right?
Yeah.
And it's not about paying me more, right? It's not about that. It's just if I don't. So we had a discussion on the role that I was playing, and actually there's been a slight change in that, which I think is really positive. But I think the key thing for me is um, I just want to be happy in what I'm doing. That's my goal, right? I said I've gone through. I'll be very honest with you. I'm not earning what I used to earn in Accenture, right? I'm not, but I'm
Okay.
very happy. I'm very happy with what I am, right? With
Okay.
what I'm earning right now, and I think that that's good. That for me is the measure of success is my happiness in my role. The measure of success is whether or not I feel like I'm actually adding value
Okay.
to clients and that type of thing. And I still do volunteer as well.
Okay. And what does happy means?
Happy means that I actually,
Speaking of
yeah,
happy,
yeah. So
yeah,
happiness will be different things to different people, right? Some
exactly.
people, happiness will be all about the money, right? And
Yes.
again, that's fine, right? I don't judge people, at all. I don't sort of say, oh, you're overly materialistic. That's not about it. It's not about that. If that's what you need to be, you got to sort of think of the piece. Again, everybody's got such a lovely life story, right? Those
Yeah.
people obviously are coming to that because of their life story. So, that's what I was saying. Who am I to judge that? You can't judge people for what their things are. As long as they're not hurting anybody in the doing of it, and as long as
Mhm.
they're being ethical, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. If that's your goal, that's fine. For me, I want to make sure that I'm enjoying life. I have time for myself. I have time for my family. I
Okay.
can do the things that I want to be able to do. I am working harder now than I ever worked in Accenture, but it's on my terms. So, I work sometimes late into the evening, but I've taken, a little bit of time over lunch to go and, sort of drop my son off somewhere or do something like that, Jimmy. And I can do that. You know what I mean?
I agree with
So,
you on that. I agree with this. That sense of contentment.
yes, yes,
Okay. To be
yes,
able to give time to what is a priority for you.
yes, exactly,
Some people is
exactly.
money, yeah.
Yeah,
Some people priority is money, so it doesn't mean they're
exactly.
bad. You say we can't
Yeah,
judge them.
yeah.
Yeah, because I don't want people to feel like, oh well, if I'm looking for money, is it bad? That's make you
No,
happy. That's fine. All right.
and sometimes it's not even just about being happy. Sometimes it's about because of a fear, right? It could be a fear or a risk thing. Sort of so they're saying,
Yeah.
look, I want to earn enough money so that I don't have to worry about money. That could be a motivator. You know what I mean? So it's not just about being sort of mercenary about earning more, earning more, earning more. It's not. It's often not that. But as I say, that's why you can't. I don't like to judge people
Mm.
because you don't know people's backstory. You don't know their life story.
Yeah.
You know.
And tell me something, you. So we are very happy that you've been here. All right. So, but I want to ask you, like, your impact right now in your end story is where you are with your business. So you're making an impact by creating employment and yourself supporting other businesses from what you've learned. All right. But we touched base a little bit on AI, but I want to bring AI a little bit more because I know AI has in the future AI will have a lot more negative impact on self-employed people, where the things that you you were doing, people can now do it because AI can
Yes.
actually help them do it.
Yes.
So is this something that you're worried about in your journey, or how do you leverage this future risk? Because we can see that coming. You have to be honest, right? So how do you approach with, like, let's say you're helping your client to redo their process, for
Yeah,
example, to
yeah,
remanage their
yeah,
processes. And me being a process specialist in Accenture, I seen how I did help
yeah,
my end game for me.
yeah,
We came up with new automated system and all that. And I'm just thinking, as a consultant, it's kind of risky sometimes because a lot of things AI is doing it already.
yeah, yeah.
So how do you feel about that? And as an impact to, how do you think you can use still AI in the future to
Yeah,
still impact people,
yeah,
even though you feel it's going to be a problem for you as a
yeah.
business person?
So I think we can, like in a lot of the companies, a lot of the clients that I'm working with, yes, of course, it's about helping them, redesign a process and look. But where I'm coming in is with the expertise to back that up, right? I
Okay.
can I can write something down and I can say follow this process. But a process is never simple, ever, right? There's always going to
Never.
be
I know.
exceptions or anomalies and it's how you deal with those. And,
Mm,
the more complex the business, the more complex those things are. So we can get 80% of it done, but it's that 20%.
okay.
So that for me is sort of thing one. A lovely, lovely example, actually. I was talking to somebody that does graphic design and specifically designs logos for companies.
Mm,
And I said to her, "How are you competing with AI? Because I can go into ChatGPT right now, and I can get ChatGPT to do a logo for me." And she said, "Yes, you can, but the more times you use that image, you're getting one single image, right? You're not necessarily getting all the very specific nuances behind it, like your RGB code and all that type of thing, right?" And she said, when you use a graphic designer, you're getting a lot more of that interaction, that expertise that she brings, right? Whereas ChatGPT is just as good as your prompt is. And if you're
yeah,
bad at prompting, it's not going to be good, right?
I know.
Yeah. But she said also, you'll get that image, you'll download that image, and by the time you've used it on the 10th thing, the image is starting to deteriorate and all that type of thing, right? And she was talking about, the copy paste stuff that you do all the time, right? And she
Mm,
said, then you find that you want to be able to use it in this format, but you don't have the thing. So in my logo image, for example, there's a version that I have that's got a transparent background, so whatever's behind it will sort of show through the R for my ridge, right? I couldn't have done that necessarily in ChatGPT, or I don't know how to do that. So I got a graphic designer to do it for me. So, of course, the sort of the easy, mundane stuff, that will go, but the more difficult stuff where you need that sort of that more complex level of expertise and all that type of thing. I think that's not going to go in any great shape or form in a
yeah.
hurry. But
Okay.
also, it's important that each one of us looks at AI and how AI is going to impact our own jobs and kind of go, okay, now how can I use this to benefit me, and what are the risks? And then to look at the risks. And sometimes that's going to mean, well, I have to change career, right? That's just an unfortunate part of it. And sometimes you can actually use it to your benefit. I can say to you now that if I wasn't using AI, I would not be as successful, because the main thing for me is getting it to challenge me, especially if I go, oh, I've got this fantastic idea, I want to do this with my client, and AI will give me 5 reasons why that's a bad idea, and I go, okay, don't agree with the top two, but actually those three I hadn't thought about, so let me mitigate the risks by doing this,
Mm,
that, and the next thing slightly differently. And it's brilliant from that perspective. And also
wow.
just the mundane jobs that just take up my time. Somebody
Yeah,
went,
the creative part
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's three aspects to any business. There's admin, there's sales, and there's delivery, right?
Yeah.
In my business. And it's the admin that I can automate, that I can get rid of, which
Yeah.
allows me more time for sales and delivery.
Yes, that's brilliant. Nat, I just want to say thank you so much, but I want you to tell our listener a little bit more about your business so people can
Yes.
know exactly what you do so that they can, your new business, your new baby, like they call it, and where people can reach you. Because I think I also want the listener to be able to reach you if they want some help in their business. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
look, Ridge Business Solutions, what I do is in the name. I find solutions to your business problems. I'm there really around helping clients to improve their profits, helping improve efficiencies. A lot of times clients are sort of trying to engage me to help them with because they want to increase the value of their business, or they're trying to scale or grow their business. So that's oftentimes where I get involved. The second part of my business is really around coaching and mentoring of CEOs or sort of senior level people. I am actually just writing a book. In fact, I've written a book, and it's going to get published hopefully within the next month or two on leadership, and it's designed for new managers. So
Okay.
if when that comes out, I'll let you know. I'll post it up on LinkedIn anyway, and sort of get that out. And then the third area that I'm very involved in or interested in is around board work. So doing board facilitations and sitting on boards as a non-exec director as well. So those are my three areas. It's the business consulting, it's the coaching and mentoring, and it is the board work.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this conversation at the DSTV. Your story is an inspiration. So before I leave, I need to tell my listener the impact you had in my life. All right. So you has been a senior manager for a while and very quiet contrary to what anybody can think. You're a very calm person in general. So I'm so sorry. I have to say that we were a little bit scared of you. I have to say. Not
Sorry.
because you were scary, but because we knew how serious you took things. I would tell you that there are two form of people who impact your life. Like you have your coaches, you have people who directly mentor you, but there are people who impact you just by being themselves. And
Right.
I will
Yeah.
tell you, you did that to me. All right. And this is the impact you did to me. I would never have been able to present myself the way I am today, even in my how do you call that, my content creation, even at work when I was working
Yeah.
essentially presenting, if it wasn't you. And that's the amazing is that you didn't even know that. All right. So how do I explain this impact is that you used to have every time we had a meeting, the quarterly meeting you organize, I used to see you pacing around the room before the meeting with your little sticky note or your note in the hand, and you would be walking and reading what you were doing. I remember we used to sit down and say, "What is he doing?" I think personally, I was more inquisitive. I was like, I'm a very observant by nature. I'm someone who read people. I spend time observing and reading people. And I was like, what is he doing? I wonder what he's doing. Because we have a wrong perception of managers,
Yeah.
unfortunately. We feel like, just like, for example, you spend a few minutes now telling me how you're constantly learning and that you even have coaches. I was mesmerized because a lot of time we think the manager is already up there. He doesn't need a
Yeah.
coach,
Yeah.
doesn't need support and mentoring. But it's nice to see that. And I remember you still having to learn and remember and memorize what you're going to present. It took me a while to realize that's what you were doing. I was like, wait a minute. He's a senior manager and he still wants to cram what he's doing. That means that it's very important to remember what you have to say to people. It's
Yeah.
not just be good to be able to talk and sit down.
Yeah.
You need to know your craft. So
Yes.
you were always preparing. And what I liked about it is that you weren't hiding to do that. You
Yeah.
were doing that
Yeah.
in front of us all the time. We used to
Yeah.
watch them. And that stayed with me because I came back home and I said to my children, every time you have to speak, it's not about when they had to do presentation. I say, I remember one of my senior manager used to do that. Every time you have to speak, it's not about how well you speak. It's about knowing
Yes.
what you're going to talk about. And that
Absolutely.
changed my life. I've always done that. And I always knew when I had a presentation at work, even when I do my event, my shows and everything and my platform, I always see on the editing the difference with the ones that I didn't prepare well enough and the ones that are prepared. Because you need to know your craft,
Yes.
you need to understand who you're talking to. And that's an impact that I want to say thank you to you, actually, because some people don't know the impact people by who they are. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
for me, it's the best form of impact, I have to say.
Well, Eileen, sorry, thank you very much for the compliment, right?
Yeah.
There's a couple of things, two things I'll say. First one is you appear the most natural when you are so prepared, right? You can
Yes.
only appear natural when you're that prepared. And I think for me, I remember hearing that, and I remember that's the reason I did what I did, right? Walking
Mhm.
around. And exactly, you come across as more human when people can see that, what you're also worried about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have no issue public speaking, but I want to make sure that I'm coming across as authentic and proper. And that's why, and I don't mind people seeing me practice and make mistakes and all of those types of things. The second thing I will say is, and this is not just a mutual admiration society, but honestly, you are an inspiration. You really are.
Oh, thank you so much.
So you're an absolute inspiration. I remember what you were doing, and to look back at what you were doing in Accenture and what you're doing now, that is a fundamental change, right? And I think just going through this interview with you, you've asked such lovely questions and such brilliant questions, and you've got such a lovely nature about you as well. So for me, you're an absolute inspiration as well. And so fair play to you and well done.
Thank you so much. Thank you all our listener too. I hope you've been inspired by your story, and please reach out, check his website. I'll put a link to where if you need anything for business, and even if you need a mentor, I know I'm giving him more work, but if you need a mentor, you reach out to him on his LinkedIn.
Lovely.
And it's been an amazing conversation. And guys, thank you for being part of this conversation. If you like what we're doing here at the GSTV, please like and subscribe, share the story, and join us for more story. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Celine. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.